Have you heard this story of being face to face with death for 72 hours with a crew of 58 who couldn't breathe 200 meters deep in the Pacific Ocean? Imagine there are only dark waters around you, oxygen is running out, and your only hope is the decisions your captain will make. If you also have such unforgettable stories, send them to our email address in the description and let's share them too.
I have been at sea for 20 years. I know two great oceans inch by inch. I can tell the weather from the sound of the waves and find my direction from the water currents. In my small house in Maryland, my wife Susan would pray every evening that the seas would bring me home safely. At that age when silver threads appear in my hair, when the lines drawn by sea winds on my face deepen. But that cold November morning in 1943, standing on the bridge of the United States Navy submarine USS Barracuda, I could not have known that I would experience the longest 72 hours of my life. When the sun was just beginning to rise over the azure waters of the Pacific Ocean, I had told my crew how critical this reconnaissance mission we departed from Pearl Harbor was. This mission was not just an ordinary reconnaissance. The United States General Staff had assigned us to learn about the movements of the Japanese Imperial Fleet around the Philippines. We would track Japanese convoys near the Philippines, determine the number of ships, their tonnage and routes, report their coordinates to headquarters, and return. It seemed like a routine mission. How wrong I was. That morning, as we left Pearl Harbor, the tropical breeze of Hawaii caressed my face. The palm trees swaying on the shore, the white sands sparkling in the sun, that corner of paradise, perhaps I was seeing it for the last time. I had a strange feeling inside me, as if something was going to go wrong. USS Barracuda was one of the most advanced submarines of the United States Navy. This steel monster, 95 meters long and 8 meters wide, was a deadly hunter silently waiting for its prey in the depths of the ocean. Inside my submarine, surrounded by gray steel walls, I was advancing with my crew of 58 people, 50 meters below the surface. Life inside this metal tube was very different from civilian life. Narrow corridors, low ceilings, pipes and cables crammed everywhere. Every corner of the submarine was filled with tools designed for our survival struggle. The mixture of the regular humming sound coming from the engine room, low conversations in the periscope section, and footsteps on the steel flooring was an indication that life continued inside this metal box. In the air, the smell of motor oil, the trace of salty sea air, and that characteristic smell brought by 58 men living in a closed space mixed together. It was 2:30 p.m. While the sun was shining above the surface, we were moving in dark waters. At that moment, the silence of the submarine was peaceful. Each member of my crew was experienced soldiers, masters in their own duties. Some were examining maps, some were checking instruments, and some were quietly reading books. This peaceful atmosphere was the harbinger of the approaching storm. My radio operator, David Patterson, this blond, blue-eyed young man from Kansas farms, only 24 years old, but his mastery in recognizing radio waves was surprising, came to me at a running pace. When he stood in the doorway with his broad shoulders and tall stature, the worried expression on his face showed that he was not bringing good news. His hands were trembling slightly, his forehead was sweaty, his breathing had quickened. "Captain Morrison, Japanese destroyers are approaching. There are 3 ships on the radar screen. They're coming this way fast. They're approximately 20 miles away and advancing at 30 knots. I immediately turned to the periscope. On the surface, I could see 3 black dots on the horizon. Squinting my eyes, I tried to focus better. The famous destroyers of the Japanese Imperial Navy were approaching with those sharp lines I knew like my fingerprints. Their gray painted hulls, metallic surfaces gleaming in the sunlight, and soldiers moving on their decks. I had encountered these ships before and knew how deadly they were. My pulse began to quicken, but I had to appear calm. 58 people were looking at me, and their lives depended on the decisions I would make. The cold metal of the periscope in my hand began to sweat in my palm. Emergency dive order. To 200 meters depth, complete silence. Turn off all unnecessary systems. With my command, the submarine began to dive rapidly into the depths. The feeling you experience during diving is many times more intense than descending rapidly in an elevator. The pressure you feel in your ears, the sea's gradual embrace of us. But this embrace was not affectionate, it was deadly. Water pressure was squeezing the submarine's metal hull. Creaking sounds were coming from everywhere. When we stopped at 200 meters, complete silence prevailed. The interior of the submarine was shrouded in graveyard silence. My crew held their breath, eyes on me, waiting for me. The same question was on everyone's face. Will they find us? Above us, we could hear the sound of the destroyer's engines. Just like distant thunder, but much more threatening. This sound was the footsteps of death. Suddenly, the first depth charge exploded. The entire hull of the submarine shook as if a giant fist had struck it. The feeling experienced at that moment was the underwater version of an earthquake. The lights on the ceiling swayed wildly, some broken glass fragments scattered on the floor. Some of my crew fell to the ground, while others tried to stay upright by holding onto nearby pipes. When the second explosion came, a pipe burst in the rear section. I heard the sound of water rapidly filling in. That terrible gushing sound was like the whisper of death. "Damage report, immediately," I shouted. My voice echoed in the submarine's narrow corridors. My engine mechanic, Mike O'Connor, this 35-year-old man with a large build, dark hair, broad shoulders, whose hands bore the traces of years of working in Chicago factories, came running. His 6-foot frame almost touched the ceiling as he passed through the narrow corridor. His face was drenched in sweat, his shirt was soaking wet. There was no panic in his brown eyes, but there was serious concern. "Captain, there's serious leakage in the rear section. The main power system is damaged. We'll have serious problems with electricity generation. The water pumps are also affected." When the third depth charge exploded, something broke in the torpedo section at the bow of the submarine. The sound of metal pieces falling, the sound of glass breaking. Tommy Sullivan, that young boy from Boston, green-eyed, caramel-colored hair. That innocent-faced 22-year-old young man, whose face was just beginning to show military lines, came out of the section injured. Blood was flowing from his left arm. His face was wrinkled with pain. The sleeve of his uniform was torn, showing a deep cut where pink flesh could be seen underneath. My medic, Dr. James Rodriguez, immediately ran to Tommy. This young doctor, dark-skinned, brown-eyed, medium height. This 28-year-old man, whose hands still carried the precision of medical school, was trying to remain calm even under stress. But in those deep brown eyes, I could see the shadows of fear. His hands trembling slightly, he opened his medical bag. Hours were passing, and every passing minute was like hell. The destroyers were still above us, as if they could smell us. From time to time they would drop depth charges trying to find us. With each explosion, our submarine suffered more damage. Water leaks were increasing, and worst of all, oxygen was beginning to run out. There was a metallic taste in the air. Breathing was becoming difficult. The first night passed like this. In the darkness we spoke in whispers. To avoid making noise, everyone had taken off their shoes and was walking in sock feet. Everyone had withdrawn to their own corner, thinking of their loved ones at home. I too couldn't get my mind off my small house near Baltimore in Maryland. I was thinking of my wife Susan, blonde, blue-eyed. 40 years old, but still maintaining the beauty of her youth. That beautiful woman who knitted sweaters for me every morning. I had 2 children. My 12-year-old son Robert wanted to be a sailor like his father. My 8-year-old daughter Mary would watch the sea from the window every evening until her father came home. I wondered if I could show them what kind of hero their father was. Or would they grow up fatherless like other children? The morning of the second day, the situation had gotten even worse. The oxygen in the air had decreased so much that everyone's breathing had become labored. Even speaking had become difficult. Words seemed to freeze on lips. Mike O'Connor was trying to repair the electrical systems, but we were losing power every hour. The lights inside the submarine had become dim, as if we were suspended in a limbo between death and life. Signs of oxygen deficiency had begun to appear in some of my crew. Faces were pale, lips slightly purplish. Some were complaining of dizziness. Dr. Rodriguez was trying to prioritize the wounded with his limited oxygen supply. In these critical moments, the solidarity of my crew amazed me. Tommy Sullivan, despite being injured, was helping his friends. Mike O'Connor, despite being exhausted from fatigue, continued to repair the systems. David Patterson was working day and night to repair the radio equipment. The temperature inside the submarine had risen abnormally. Since the ventilation systems weren't working, the metallic walls had become slippery with sweat. The fact that 58 people were breathing in a closed space made the air even heavier. "Captain," said David Patterson in a weak voice. His voice had almost turned into a whisper. "The radio system has completely collapsed. All electronic systems malfunctioned due to the shock created by the depth charges. We can't even send a distress call." This was the most difficult decision I made as a commander. I gathered my crew. 58 people were looking at me with tired and pale eyes. Some of their lips had begun to turn blue from lack of oxygen. In the dim light of the submarine, they looked like ghosts. But the hope in their eyes was still alive. "Friends, our situation is serious, and I won't deny it. But I have been at sea for 20 years, and I will not leave any of you here. This submarine will not be our grave. It will be our savior. We will all return home together. Our families are waiting for us." Dr. Rodriguez continued to care for the wounded. He was trying to create miracles with limited medical supplies. He had carefully cleaned the wound on Tommy Sullivan's arm and made a temporary bandage. This young boy, despite his pain and fatigue, was trying to smile. The determination of that young soldier in his eyes made me proud. On the afternoon of the third day, the miracle happened. The engine sounds of the destroyers slowly began to fade away. That terrible thunder sound was finally diminishing. We waited silently for hours, holding our breath. Every sound inside the submarine, even our heartbeat, seemed too loud. Finally, there was complete silence. The seas above us were now empty. "Mike, can you operate the main power system?" I asked. My voice sounded strange to my ear after that long silence. "I'll try, Captain, but I can't guarantee it. The systems are very damaged." With 58 people holding their breath, we slowly began to rise. Every meter of ascent meant we were one step closer to heaven. 150 meters, 100 meters, 50 meters. When we reached periscope depth, I checked above. The sea was completely empty. Finally, we surfaced. The penetration of sunlight through the opened hatch of the submarine was the most beautiful feeling we experienced at that moment. That golden light was as if the gates of heaven had opened. We all took deep breaths. The filling of our lungs with clean air made us feel reborn. The clear blue of the Pacific, the warmth of the sun. It was the most beautiful moment we had lived. David Patterson tried to repair the radio system and after exhausting hours finally established contact with Pearl Harbor. At that moment, the joy experienced inside the submarine was indescribable. This call, beginning with "Mayday, Mayday. This is USS Barracuda. Our coordinates ... was our last hope of clinging to life. Pearl Harbor Radio Center immediately responded, "USS Barracuda, we hear you. Give us your coordinates, rescue ships are departing." With this news, the expression of joy on my crew's face made us forget all the pain we had experienced for 72 hours. But we weren't saved yet. Our submarine was taking on water and it was unknown how long it could last. 3 hours later, the United States Navy rescue ships found us. Those beautiful blue and white ships, with their star-spangled flags waving on them, were the most beautiful sight I had ever seen in my life. The rescue teams worked professionally, first taking the wounded, then all crew members safely to the ships. When I surfaced, I felt my knees buckle before the endless blue of the Pacific. That warm sun, that clean air, that feeling of freedom. After 72 hours, we returned to life. The happiness on each of my crew members' faces taught me that command was not just giving orders, but taking people home.
Captain Morrison and his crew of 58 were all reunited with their families after being rescued from that 72-hour submarine captivity. This story was recorded as one of the most dramatic survival stories experienced underwater during wartime. If you also have such unforgettable family stories, share them with us. Because in every story there is heroism, and in every heroism there is hope.